What is going on, everybody? Welcome to another Angle of Pursuit podcast, your fantasy football home over at fakepigskin.com. I'm your host, Kyle Robert. You can follow me on Twitter at NotoriousKRO, which is conveniently just below my face on our new layout. Thanks to my good buddy John for hooking it up. It looks really sweet. With me tonight, as you can see, and you can see his Twitter handle. Make sure you are following him if you're not already doing so. It's Damian Dabrowski. What's up, Damian?
We got graphics, we got backgrounds, we're on YouTube Live, man. We're going mainstream. Before you know it, they're going to say we're selling out, huh?
That's what they're saying. That's what they're saying. They're, we're getting a little too big for our britches, a little too professional, but here we are, and off we go. There's a lot to get into, Damian. I guess, what was your biggest reaction from week 2? Was there something that really stood out to you, something that you're like, oh, I want to think about this differently going forward? Was there anything that you just, anything in that ballpark, in that vicinity?
Yeah, honestly, it was a little more of what we saw in week 1 where, we complained about how, with the exception of maybe 1 or 2 games, it was just a mess. The offenses looked bad. There wasn't a lot of scoring. There was a lot of sloppy play, turnovers. Missed opportunities, and really, I think it was a little bit better, but with the exception of, the New Orleans game with New England, which I think everybody expected, and the same with the Falcons and Packers on Sunday night. With the exception of those 2 games, I think it was a lot of the same things. A lot of quarterbacks, underperforming, a lot of you saw with the Giants on Monday night, just bizarre play calling. You have teams continuously throwing 5-yard passes on 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, quarterbacks taking sacks. And it was kind of in my head, but there was actually a pretty cool article on Yahoo today about just looking at how much offense has declined. It's a 2-game sample because we're looking really just these 2 weeks, but already relative to last year in terms of points per game, in terms of yards per game. And a lot of it can be attributed to the fact that I think, breaking down the metrics, at least what was kind of pointed out in this article, is that teams are taking a lot more sacks and they're throwing a lot shorter passes. So you don't have as many teams, taking chances downfield, basically getting those big plays. And you have quarterbacks taking sacks. And we have those extreme situations like Seattle, where the offensive line is just so bad that I don't even know what the next step here is. But it's a combination of that and I think just really poor quarterback play, taking bad sacks. And, I think it's going to improve, but I think we might be in for the same way, in baseball, there's this huge home run surge and it's kind of changing the way we look at guys. I think we might have to, reevaluate things, and maybe we're not going to get the exact same offensive, totals that we've been accustomed to these past couple of seasons.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. Like, I was looking at the Vegas totals this week, and there's a lot of 39s, 38s, 40s. Vegas has been getting killed by these over-unders, and these 9-6 games. I don't know what's going on. I wonder. I like you like to think that it's going to take a couple weeks. They're going to figure it out. Maybe it's just a lack of hitting in the practicing. It's a lack of hitting in preseason. These guys basically play 4 or 5 quarters max over the course of a whole month. Like, they just need these live bullets, and then after the first month, everything kind of adjusts and figures it out. So it's hard to kind of go too crazy, but Green Bay has clear problems, Seattle has clear problems, Cincinnati has clear problems, the Giants are just a complete clusterfuck. We come in with all these expectations and we know these things, but at the same time, it's hard to assume that the offensive line is just going to figure it out, and the expectations we had coming into the season are going to bear out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, again, we're looking at a 2-week sample size, so it's tough to say what's going to be actionable at this point. But I think, if we're looking at it the way we've kind of seen it come about in baseball, I think what's going to happen is it might just bump up the value of those really extreme guys like, Tom Brady, like Drew Brees, that we almost think of, I guess, maybe week 1 aside for Brady, but almost being kind of immune to this offensive environment in the sense that those teams and those offensive systems are always going to put up points. And if we still think they're going to do that, and there hasn't really been much reason to think they won't, I think the gap between them and kind of those middle tier quarterbacks, for instance, that we were expecting these huge seasons from, where we've seen Andy Dalton throw 30 touchdowns in the past, Phillip Rivers, guys like that. Maybe if that middle tier takes a step down, and that could happen really, at every position. Same thing at receiver or running back, where those elite, 4 or 5 guys at the top, I think the gap between them and the middle tier might be a little wider than we've seen it in years past.
Yeah, and we'll get into some interesting names tonight, like Cam Newton, a guy that we, have seen be a top 5 guy in previous seasons, just not happening. And it is an interesting scenario. Let's talk about those couple of those offenses, though, because I think there's a lot to dig into. Let's talk about the Bengals first. You mentioned Andy Dalton, a guy that I was definitely in on, a guy that I'm cautiously optimistic about, a guy that I recommended in my QB Streamers article. So, I guess, I kind of feel like Johnny Depp in Pirates of the Caribbean, where his ship is just sinking and he's just standing there and going down with the ship no matter what. And, that'll be me in my Andy Dalton jersey this weekend. But, they fired their OC, so obviously they recognize the problem. Ken Zampese's out. Bill Lazor's in, a guy who has experience. You think the Bengals' offense is going to be different? I know that, we mentioned those offensive lines that are still a mess. They're right up there with everyone else. They kind of adjusted their skills, so now they have quicker guys. Now they're making quicker throws, and it's just hard for me to say the Bengals are bad based on a Thursday night game against the Texans and a game where they faced the really good Ravens. And I know Andy Dalton was historically bad and basically cratered your week in most cases. But offensive coordinator shift this early, do you think it's going to make a difference? And if so, how soon could we see the fruits of that?
So I'm looking at it really in 2 ways right now. I think on the positive side is we have to assume that, with this coaching change, that Bill Lazor, he's not going to do the exact same thing that just got Zampese fired. So, we don't know what it's going to be yet, but we have to assume that he's going to try to do something differently, since whatever they were doing before resulted in them not scoring a touchdown yet this season. Now, that said, the personnel is still the same. You mentioned...
I just got to hold you right there. They haven't scored a touchdown this season. Think about that. 2 games, 8 full quarters, no touchdowns. It's mind-boggling.
Especially when you see, the Jaguars with multiple touchdowns and just
AJ
teams
Green and Joe Mixon and Tyler Eifert, and that's borderline unacceptable.
Well, that's why we got people getting fired. But look, that part of it again. So the personnel's not going to change, but at the same time, we expected so much more, and we've seen so much more from these guys that they have, that you have to expect it to get better. I think really what the ideal situation would be, and we'll see how this plays out, but the best thing this team can do right now is just essentially concentrate their targets on that offense. Because, Andy looked terrible, but how do you throw the 4th down, game on the line, and you're throwing to Alex Erickson? I think I saw AJ Green got 1 target the entire second half there, and they were down a score the entire half.
Yeah, and he can throw him these balls 60 yards down the field, and he'll go up between 3 defenders and pull it down, and you're not pelting him with targets. What are you doing?
Look, we don't want to oversimplify, but it's what would you do if you were playing Madden? Would you pick the Falcons and then just throw to your fullback in the flat? No, you would just throw it deep to Julio because he's better than whoever's covering him.
Would you pick the Saints and give handoffs to Kobe Fleener on the goal line? I think the answer is absolutely yes.
Well, 100% success rate.
Does this mean it's time to buy Joe Mixon, where people are getting annoyed, and maybe the shift means bye-bye Jeremy Hill, bye-bye, obviously Bernard will get some work, but it's time for Joe Mixon to take over this role and become the focus, because they're clearly lacking, offensive playmakers?
I sure hope so. I think, the way they've been splitting it, just with everybody getting 5-7 touches, they can't get into a rhythm there. And I do think Hill's going to be the guy that's going to get phased out here. Give Mixon the early down work, and keep Bernard in for passing downs. Give him the occasional couple of carries, maybe some sweeps, some tosses, get him on the outside. But I don't know if it's going to take effect all of a sudden in week 3. I think it might be a gradual shift. At this point, however, it seems like Mixon's value is probably as low as it's going to be all season. So it's certainly worth throwing out some offers out there, especially if the Mixon owner's 0-2, if he took a high pick on him and he's struggling.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you can flip, one of these kind of emerging running backs for him. Again, it's all going to be contextual and kind of how competitive your league is and how plugged in these owners are. But maybe somebody like Terrence West or Buck Allen, somebody who's gotten a much more Tariq Cohen, somebody that's gotten a more prominent role early, but really isn't kind of objectively in as good of an offensive situation just based on team and talent and really, just overall skill level. So that's certainly a switch that you could try to make. It might be tougher in kind of the more competitive leagues, because I think there's been a lot of, buy mix and now stuff going on in kind of the Twitterverse here among the people that we follow and interact with. But again, each league is different, and it certainly won't hurt. And hey, I mean, there's still the chance that Mixon doesn't become anything. So it's not like, this is a guarantee by any means.
Nope, that's very true. And this is still an offense that's a complete mess. And you could be buying Mixon thinking you need him, and he ends up kind of just being a mess the rest of the way. Speaking of players to potentially buy, a guy that I just purchased today, let's talk about Russell Wilson and those Seattle Seahawks. Another offense that has been a complete mess. Obviously couldn't do much in Green Bay. Go home against the Niners. Everybody's saying, oh, start all your Seahawks. The Niners look pretty good. Obviously, Carlos Hyde was a monster, but Russell Wilson, Doug Baldwin, my boy Chris Carson. Are you trying to see if you can get Seahawks pieces on your fantasy team?
I'm worried. And it's a tough place to be in because I have a lot of Wilson and a lot of Doug Baldwin. And I think, what I will say is I think that in places where you do have them, I'm certainly not looking to sell them, but I would be a little bit hesitant about being proactive in terms of getting them, just because I don't really see a path to how that offensive line gets considerably better. I mean, I have to imagine that just by virtue of showing up to practice, 5 days a week, they're going to get slightly better. But at the same time, it's, if this is a process that takes 4 weeks, 6 weeks before we actually see kind of, and we've seen this in the past where Wilson has these amazing stretches, week 10 to week 14 or so. Yeah. But at that point, if you go 2-6 in the first 8 weeks, it's really not going to matter. So I guess I'm still fine with Wilson, because I do think the one positive that comes out of this is if he starts running more, just out of sheer necessity, because they can't run. The only thing they can run are 3-step drops. If he tries to run a 5-step drop, he has to, jet out of the pocket before he can even look downfield. And that's a problem, because if you look at the pieces on this offense, I mean, Baldwin, Lockett, Paul Richardson, these aren't Alshon Jeffrey where you just throw a jump ball and that's kind of how you move the ball downfield. These guys rely on kind of precision timing routes and their quickness to get in and out of breaks and really run shorter routes and make things happen after the catch. And you can't do that if you can't, protect for long enough for Wilson to get the ball out. So, you would hope that Jimmy Graham would kind of be the one guy maybe that has the physical mismatch.
Yeah, but then you only target him one time and he gets one catch against the Niners. That makes no sense.
Yeah, I mean, he did leave that game with an injury. I did think he came back at some point, but he looked bad in week 1 in terms of he just looked kind of old and slow, and you would figure that another offseason removed from this injury, given that he was still pretty usable last season, that we would kind of have that explosiveness come back. There were all those reports about him, losing 20 pounds and being in the greatest shape of his life and everything like that. So it's not really what we thought we would see from him. But if he can't get back to that, that's obviously a concern, because this isn't what I would call, a deep offense in terms of weapons. This isn't kind of what we were looking at with the Patriots before the season, where, they go 6-7 playmakers deep. This is a pretty concentrated, target share between Baldwin and what we thought would be Graham, maybe kind of some of the backs out of the backfield. But it's going to be an issue, and I do think that it's going to take a while to kind of get together. Now, I'm still probably going to be starting Wilson and Baldwin everywhere I have them for the foreseeable future, but I would be a little bit reluctant about trying to kind of go out and trade assets to get these guys.
Yeah, I mean, the trade I made, I had Trevor Siemian and Andy Dalton as my quarterbacks, which, I mean, whatever. I'm fine streaming, but I got Russell Wilson. I got Lamar Miller on a team that I had David Johnson and needed running back help. sent Nuke Hopkins out, sent Simeon out. I loaded a receiver. I feel really comfortable with where my receiving core was, so it was a good gamble for me to take. But if the Seahawks do it to us again, where they start slow for the first 6-7 weeks and explode the second half, I'm just gonna avoid them. I'm not gonna draft any of them on draft day, and I'm gonna wait for other owners to get frustrated and either try and trade for them or pick them up off the waiver wire midseason. Because this will be the third in a row. In the first year, we can explain away everything. In the second year with the injuries and, that's why he didn't run as much and that's why this, that's why that. It looks to be like the Seahawks are cheap. Don't want to spend money on offensive line. It takes them a month to a month and a half to develop them, to get them to a point where they can actually run a competent offense, and then they take out. I still love my boy Chris Carson. I told you guys to add him last week. He was great. Almost 100 yards on 20 carries. I don't know. There's some concerns there. The last offense I want to hit on, we'll get into some injuries, and then we'll obviously do our starts and our sits of the week. Help get you guys your pieces in place for the Week 3 slate. The Giants. Is this the worst looking offense in all of football? Like, we were talking about some bad ones, but like Bob McAdoo saying, okay, well now maybe I'll give up play calling. Eli looks terrible. Odell, was back this week, which is good. All those Odell owners that were worried that maybe he missed several weeks, only missed a week. But the Giants, man, they really scare me.
They're up there. It's been a disaster. I've never been very fond of Eli, so I'm maybe not so secretly taking a lot of enjoyment in this. But it's kind of, they just have the worst combination of pieces when you factor in that they don't, like the Seahawks, they just don't have an O-line. Yeah. And at least, Russell Wilson can move around. Eli Manning, the guy trips over his own lineman half the time. Now you're going to have D linemen on him too. It's outrageous. So, you put that with the fact that, you mentioned McAdoo. I don't understand what they're doing. It's not that hard. It's like basic football philosophy. And it just seems like, to them, what's really weird about this is that when McAdoo was the offensive coordinator, this wasn't an issue. Like, they actually had pretty good play calling, and I don't know if it's like he just can't handle being the head coach and still doing that, or if we're going to say that it was actually Tom Coughlin who was doing it. But Coughlin looked like he was going to keel over and die. So it's like,
but he's the one redoing the Jaguars. Look how good they are. I think McAdoo is in the Ken Wisenhunt bucket, where he's an amazing OC. He let him have fun, let him focus just on that when he tries to be the president and in charge of everything and run the show and make sure everyone's at meetings and make sure everyone's this and everyone. He just too much. He can't comprehend. Let him go into his room with his whiteboard, draw up plays. He has all these really unique weapons in Evan Ingram and Odell Beckham and Shane Vereen out of the backfield. And obviously Brandon Marshall, who everyone who took him real early is very, very disappointed. He's a great OC, terrible head coach. And that's just
cool. Cool guy Bob with the slick back hair now. And, he's kicking field goals from the one. And
sure, as you do.
Macadoofus.
Macadoofus.
Him and his laminated play sheets, just reading that menu just left and right all night
charts. Long. Oh, I need to go to section C, number 27. Oh, there. Yep. It's just, it's a mess.
It's like an oversized diner menu. You know how they like laminate those, and you're like at the diner, and you're like, why is there 900 things on this menu? Like, there's only 3 things I want to eat anyway. Yeah, that's McAdoo for you.
It's like the Cheesecake Factory where they go in and. It's just like 27 pages of different stuff. And it's like, no, I just want a burger and fries. Thank you. Injuries, whatnots. Let's talk about them. DeMarco Murray. Obviously, Derrick Henry was the star of the show in the second half. Murray still banged up, didn't practice. Wednesday's an interesting day. I was looking at Roto World earlier, and it seems like anyone who has any sort of injury history is a veteran or, just not wanting to practice kind of take Wednesday as their day to do nothing. So I don't like to read into it too much, but the fact that he was banged up last week didn't practice. They're home this week versus Seattle. Of all the things that are wrong with the Seahawks, their defense still looks pretty dang good, although Carlos Hyde did rip them up pretty nicely. If DeMarco Murray's healthy, is he a guy you are comfortable throwing in your lineup, or do you want to kind of wait a week and see if we get another Derrick Henry show, or maybe, it's something where he gets a few carries? Oh, now he's banged up again, and now he's out. Kind of what are you doing with him if you own him?
I'm certainly not comfortable with it, just given how these last 2 weeks have played out between the injury that I think he was already starting to, that kind of came up in the preseason, and it's a continuation of that now, and the fact that Henry's been getting an increased workload. But I find it hard to imagine. I mean, you can bump him down from like an RB1, which I guess he was at the start of the season, to more of a flex play this week. But I find it hard to bump him much lower than that, assuming he plays. It's just hard to think with kind of the carnage we've seen at running back that you're going to have enough options. I mean, unless you were able to pick up Chris Carson, and then I guess maybe whether it's like Chris Thompson now or like P Ryan or somebody that Buck Allen, like somebody that you think is confidently going to get 12 to 16 touches, because I don't think Murray's getting 20 touches in this game, healthy or not. So at that point, in a tough matchup, I just think you're going to want to go with one of those other options. But I just don't know how many teams have that luxury right now.
Like if you own Buck Allen or Chris Thompson or Tariq Cohen and you're in a full PPR, are you sitting DeMarco Murray for one of those guys? If you're looking at like your RB2 option, say you have, I don't know, say you have Zeke, say you have some other running back that you took early.
Yeah, I can certainly make that case. Like you said, the full PPR, especially for guys like Thompson and Cohen, because it seems like, especially the way Cohen's been playing, I mean, he's basically a lock to catch, 6-7 passes, which that's 70 yards for Murray, which at this point would be a good game. So I can certainly see that with Thompson. It's a little bit more of the big play stuff that hopefully we'll get. It'll depend on if Kelly plays or not, because if he's out, at least maybe we give him an extra 4 or 5 carries to what is usually just a couple for him in the run game.
Yeah, but even when Kelly went out, it was mostly P Ryan. P Ryan got 21 carries in that game, so.
I think the issue there though is that they obviously didn't game plan for Thompson to be involved in the run game. So when that injury happened, I'm sure that kind of the way they had it in practice leading up to that or on the depth chart was that P Ryan was basically running a lot of the same plays that Kelly was. So rather than adjusting on the fly, I think if they know Kelly's not going to play and they have a whole week to it. Now, I still don't think Thompson's going to get, more than like 8 carries, maybe at most. But it's like difference between 2 carries and 8 carries is pretty significant, especially when you consider his ability to break one off.
Yeah, if he gets 6 for 60 in the passing game and then he gets, 7 for 45 instead of 3 for 25, I mean, that's an extra, 10 points or whatever. So that is nice. Corey Davis is ruled out. He's not going to play. Rashard Matthews has been a pretty solid option. Is he a guy that you're more interested in with Davis out, or is it because they're facing Seattle as kind of a matchup to avoid?
I'm leaning on the avoid side. We haven't really seen this passing game take off. It was a nice game for Matthews in week 1 against Oakland, but we saw, last week against a much tougher Jacksonville secondary, there really wasn't much for him to do there, and I think Seattle's going to be a lot of the same. So he's kind of in that wide receiver 3 flex territory for me. But if I had a comparable guy in a better matchup, I'd certainly lean that way.
Yeah. Is Derrick Henry a guy that you're considering in flex options? I know we were talking about Murray being banged up. I personally think Henry's more of a guy that, in matchups where the Titans could potentially get up big, like last week, then Derrick Henry becomes a guy I'm interested in. I don't know about this spot, but what about for you?
A little of the same. I think, on the plus side, we obviously, even with kind of the struggles that Tennessee's defense has, we don't really expect Seattle to be able to put up points because of kind of their own issues that we talked about at the top of the show here. So if this game is close, I think that's favorable for Henry in terms of just giving him more touches, especially since I just don't think that Murray's going to get, like I said, whether he plays or not, I don't think he's getting, 20, 25 carries like we saw from him last season in games where they were kind of running down the clock. So I think the touch floor is pretty safe there, and we know he's a guy that's going to have his opportunities in the red zone. So he's certainly in the flex conversation for me.
Yeah, and I mean Vegas over under start opened at 44. It's down to 42, 42 and a half. So that shows you that people think this is going to be a low scoring run the ball, good defense kind of game. So it may be one to avoid. Jordy Nelson left that game against Atlanta real early with a quad injury, but he's practiced today, and expects to play in week 3. Assuming he's healthy, he's a must play against the Bengals now.
Yeah, if he's out there, you have to. You just hope it's not the same as last week, where you get one play and then he's done for the night.
Yeah. John Brown still dealing with that quad issue. Obviously, with the sickle cell trait, healing is just a longer process for him. If John Brown's out, JJ Nelson a must play for you?
Absolutely, just make that swap right now. I think
Yeah.
what was it, 7 or 8 straight games with the touchdown for Nelson now. So, it's a little bit like the Tyreek Hill thing last year. It's just it doesn't seem repeatable, but at some point you just have to accept it.
Yeah, I mean, even in the first game when John Brown played, Nelson still got targets. He's a guy that I added after week 1, and I'm happy to have him after week 2. And home, I know Carson Palmer hasn't looked great. I know that team has been a mess, but at home versus a Cowboys defense that has been thrown all over, I could see Nelson having a really nice game. Maybe Fitz gets back to it, and if you're in a pinch, Carson Palmer is not the end of the world. All the tight ends are injured. Gronk's injured. Jordan Reed's injured. Jimmy Graham's injured. Tyler Eifert's constantly injured. I mean, I guess is it if they're healthy and active, you play them, and if not, then you're looking for better options.
I'm actually, with guys like Eifert and some of these guys that even when they play, there's just a lot of inconsistency. If Gronk's playing, I'm playing Gronk, obviously. Jordan Reed, I'm playing Reed. But with some of these other guys, especially like Eifert, who's so touchdown dependent, there's actually a couple guys I think, outside the top 8 or top 10 this week that I'm probably feeling more comfortable playing. The issue being there that, most teams aren't going to want to carry multiple tight ends unless it really is a deeper league. So unless you have somebody else you're willing to drop it might be a situation where you actually have to drop somebody like a Tyler Eifert if you want a better play this week. So, that's going to be a tough decision to make, but I certainly can see a scenario where that's justifiable.
Yeah, especially if you own Jordan Reed, if you own Gronk, I think I'm carrying an extra one, even if it means adding him Saturday. Like I'm dropping that 5th receiver, or that 7th running back, or whatever it is. Like if you have 2 quarterbacks or 2 defenses or 2 kickers, that's your first go-to, and then go from there. But I think you're going to have to. Obviously, Dwayne Allen for Gronk owners and Vernon Davis for Jordan Reed owners is a simple way if you're looking for an easy out. I did write an article on Fake Pigskin. We're going to talk about a couple of my guys tonight, but Ben Watson's another guy that I wanted to throw out there. Joe Flacco loves his tight ends. He peppered him, 8 catches, 91 yards in week 2. Obviously, the London game gets a little weird, but I think Watson should be in a spot where if you need a tight end, he could be nice. For more options, definitely go check out my latest article on Fake Pigskin. A lot of good content is up there. Before we get into our starts of the week, I want to thank our sponsor, Draft. Head over to playdraft.com/fakepigskin or download the app from the iTunes Store or Google Play or wherever you get your apps from, and put the promo code FakePigskin in. Deposit $5. We'll give you a year of Fake Pigskin Elite so you can get all of our premium content, our DFS content. Damian has a weekly article for Draft with some names to target. It's a unique way to play some DFS. It kind of takes away the, Konami code that some players have where they can get these amazing lineups and these random dudes. It's all based on drafts. Only one person has Brady, one person has Rodgers. It adds a unique twist. It makes it a lot of fun. And Damian Dabrowski will be there helping you along the way and giving you some names to target. So check that out. Deposit $5. You get all of our premium content. You get for the full year. So when baseball rolls around, we'll have all kinds of DFS stuff, and you get to play some awesome DFS on with our friends Draft. So make sure you are doing that. But Damian, it's time. It's time for the starts of the week. Let's jump into it, and I'll start with my quarterback. If you heard me on the Bull Rush this week, there was doing a weekly podcast that we just started. It's called Bull Rush Bets. 10, 15 minutes. It's awesome. Check that out. But my start of the week is Kirk Cousins. Love him. Home versus the Raiders. Highest over under the week. 54 points. I expect him to go home. The offense kind of opened up a little bit last week. Obviously, if Chris Thompson's catching all those checkdowns, a nice potential there. Terrell Pryor. Obviously, you want Jordan Reed out there if you can, but I think Kirk Cousins has a big game here. I think 250, 300 yards, 3 touchdowns. And if someone in your league got aggressive and cut him or got annoyed or whatever, like I love him this week and I'm absolutely playing him.
Yeah, I'm totally with you on Cousins. I think it's been disappointing, the first 2 weeks here, but if Terrell Pryor makes a couple more catches there, I think his numbers look a lot different. We like that he's at home, and we know the Raiders are going to put up points, so there's going to be plenty of throwing in this game.
100%.
And hey, on kind of on that aspect of it, as you'll see with my start of the week here, but with just a couple of the names I'm gonna pimp here, it's a little bit of a backwards week for me. Some of these are things that I normally would never say, like Big Ben on the road, but here I am saying it. And honestly, I think if you look at the slate this week, there's no point in saying start Brady, start Brees, start Rodgers. So really, we're kind of looking at a little bit of a lower tier of quarterbacks. And honestly, I think the issue here is I really do like the Chicago front seven. Mm-hmm. And then we've seen that, Le'Veon really hasn't been able to get it going these last 2 weeks. And again, the Cleveland matchup, okay, we're going to say that, his first game after not really playing the preseason, holding out everything, get his feet under him. Then the second game, well, it's Minnesota. It's a tough defense. And I think a lot of people are going to expect for him to kind of have this huge Le'Veon game here, get 25, 30 touches, 180 yards and a couple of scores. And I'm not that confident that we're going to see it here. I do think he'll have his best week, but it could be more in the pass game than we've seen. And I don't really see anybody in the secondary that can stop Antonio Brown or Martavius Bryant. Really, we know they have Jesse James in the red zone there. That's a mismatch. So if they do get it down there, it doesn't just have to be pounding it in. We even saw the shovel pass there with Schuster. So
Juju, baby.
Offense, yeah, the Juju. There's a couple ways that they can score, and I think the Steelers are going to put up some points here. Really, I guess the one concern is if Glennon, pisses all over himself and this ends up being, 24-0 at the start of the second quarter with a couple of defensive touchdowns. But assuming the Bears are okay, I do think that Roethlisberger can have one of his better road games.
Yeah, I'm a little less optimistic than you. Roethlisberger on the road always scares me, but this is a nice spot. I'm with you. I'm 100% in agreement with the Bears defense in terms of rushing. They're 10th right now in terms of rushing yards allowed, 3.2 per game, or 3.2 per attempt. They held Devonta Freeman to 37 yards. They held Tevin Coleman to 16 yards, 64 yards for the Falcons. That was their first home game. Jacquizz Rodgers was 67 yards. The Bucs as a team in week 2 had 117 yards, but they got they're up 26 at the half, so they were going to keep pounding the ball. I think the Bears I think Le'Veon Bell, like after week 3, could be a real nice buy. I think you could, if you're going to buy him, it's going to be the time because his rushing through the first 2 weeks has been bad. I don't expect him to have a massive game here. I kind of like, if you're betting inclined, I kind of like or if you're doing a picks thing, I kind of like the Bears plus 7.5. I know it's a little crazy to say, but I think they can do enough at home to keep this close, which I think could be good for Big Ben throwing. And if you're gonna use Ben on the road, I think this is a good spot. So Damian, I'm gonna go ahead and agree with you there. Let's talk running backs, and I will go first, and I'm going to talk about Jay Ajayi. He had a real nice game against the Chargers, looked really good, clear workhorse. Now he's on the road facing a Jets team that's allowed 185 rushing yards per game, 5.4 yards per carry. The Dolphins are 6-point road favorites, so that's basically, if they were playing this game in Miami, it'd be 9 points. I think this is a great spot. I think he gets the ball 20 plus times. I think the Dolphins control this game from beginning to end. And Ajayi is 120, 115 yards, a touchdown or two, and a legit factor for all of the fantasy owners.
Yeah, absolute must start. It's just good player, good matchup. It's hard to imagine, barring injury, a situation where Ajayi isn't, one of the top 5, top 8 running backs at least this week. As for my guy, I'm going to go with C.J. Anderson.
Mm-hmm.
Probably maybe perhaps the most kind of valuable player through 2 weeks here, just based on drafting him probably outside the top 15 at running back, and having a top 5 guy right now.
Yeah.
The issue always with Anderson has been the injuries, but I think what's really encouraging is I didn't think he was going to have this much of a featured role, and I think some of that has been that the Broncos have been in pretty good situations in terms of getting up early on the Chargers and just blowing out the Cowboys. So I think there's been more touches to go around as a whole in this backfield, because it's not like they're not using anybody else. I mean, Jamal Charles is still getting 8 to 10 touches a game. But the fact that Anderson is getting involved in the pass game, he had the receiving touchdown, he's getting 20 carries, and the fact that Simeon has been so much better than anybody expected is really preventing teams from being able to zero in on the run there, because we know they have good enough receivers in Thomas and Sanders to threaten teams down the field. It's just been a case of whether Simeon can make those plays, and so far he has. And until he kind of reverts to what we expected would happen, then teams are going to have to respect that. And as that continues to go, I think Anderson's efficiency is going to be up there. And as long as he can stay healthy, he's going to be a must-start guy.
Yeah, man. Buffalo's rush defense has been really good this year. I know one of the game is skewed by the Jets, but Carolina on the road, Panthers love to run. They played good rush defense there. They're top 5 in terms of yards per game. They're top 3 in terms of yards per attempt. So this is going to be a rough spot for him. I mean, you can't sit him. Like, he's been so good. I don't get a lot right, but I love Ty Montgomery and I love C.J. Anderson heading into drafts, and so far so good. But yeah, it's a weird spot. I wonder, like, are you comfortable rolling out Trevor Siemian again this week? Do you think he throws to Demarius and Emmanuel Sanders, and maybe it's just they get up kind of like they have in the first 2 weeks, and they kind of roll comfortably, so Anderson's going to get the workload? Or do you think it's more of a pound the ball on the road and good defense, and CJ will get his work there?
Well, my concern is that I don't think Buffalo is really going to be able to do much of anything in this game. I mean, we saw what happened last week. That game was like needles in your eyes. I mean, I don't know. I felt so bad for everybody in that stadium having to watch that. And we saw what Denver did to Zeke. I don't know what Buffalo's going to do to move the ball here. So if Simeon can get a couple touchdown passes early, he'll have a decent day, but I just think it's going to be a lot of running out the clock once the Broncos take a lead here.
Yeah, and that's very fair. Throw out CJ, throw out Jay. Damian, this is where we're going to have some fun. You kind of alluded to it with your sit of the week, but when you were referencing it, we'll get to him in a little bit. But I like Kelvin Benjamin this week. I know you're probably not going to agree. We can kind of mix in your sit of the week here, which is Cam Newton. But at home versus New Orleans, the cure to the terrible passing game. This is a Saints defense that's allowed 793 passing yards. I think without Greg Olsen, Kelvin Benjamin gets a little more, gets leaned on a little more heavily. I think New Orleans will be able to do enough to keep this game close and force the Panthers to throw. So I love me some Kelvin Benjamin this week.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely comes from the fact that I think Cam Newton has looked absolutely awful these first 2 weeks. I mean, if it was just like a silhouette basically, and you couldn't see what it was, it looks like Tebow. It's I mean, like I flipped it on the I don't know if this was the week 1, I think it was last week, and they were at like the 3-yard line, and they ran a bootleg, and they had McCaffrey do a little option route, completely loses his guy. He's standing, on the goal line, basically. Nobody within 10 yards of him in any direction. Cam's 5 yards away from him, could literally just underhand toss it the way pitchers do to first base. And he somehow managed to put the ball in like the fourth row, just the fourth row of the stands. I'm like, Cam, what happened? And it's not, that wasn't the first throw of that game. It's just like, the guy, I mean, it's like he can throw like a 25-yard out, but he can't throw a 5-yard dump off. It's just, it's not a defense thing. It's just like, it's not like they haven't been getting open receivers these past 2 games. And it doesn't look like he's running as much because, we've seen how many times he's already gotten kind of nicked up and has been slow to get up after a play. So I really don't think the Panthers want to just keep exposing him to these hits. So if there's not the rushing floor that we've come to expect, those 40 yards and, half a touchdown per game, essentially, I don't think he's just good enough at this point. I don't know if it's still, complications from the offseason shoulder surgery or what, but I just don't think he's good enough to give you, 280 yards and 3 scores in the air. Yeah. And, I guess like we're going to say if Olsen is out, I can see Benjamin just getting so many targets that it's almost impossible for him not to kind of put up a decent game. But I don't think he's a very good football player, to be honest. And aside from just being larger than the people covering him and being able to essentially eat a couple balls, he's not a guy that I've ever been very high on. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But I never feel good starting him.
Yeah, and I completely get it. Like, I mean, coming into the season, we were talking about what were the Panthers doing and were they going to adjust their offense, and they get all these playmakers that are, quick passes and stuff, and maybe Cam just can't do that. Maybe that's just not in his DNA, and it ends up being a situation where he ends up going somewhere where he can check the ball, or they rearrange their offense. I don't know, but there is some concerns, and if Cam Newton can't do it against the Saints, like, I don't know what to tell you. It's just at home versus New Orleans. If you don't torch them for 350 and 3 or 4 touchdowns, like, there's going to be some serious red flags going off. So, maybe that's the DFS fade, and you go other places and let everyone else run into that buzzsaw. But I think he'll be fine. Talk to me about your receiver start of the week, though, because I think I'm with you.
So, this was a guy that I was kind of all in on last year, and it never happened, and it was kind of tough to see really projected out this year in the sense that it was the same preseason hype about, now he's taking it seriously. It's obviously, maybe it's Devontae Parker.
Yep.
Maybe I'll throw you guys the name before I continue with all this stuff about him. But, I mean, look, we know the guy's a physical freak. With him, it was just a question of, okay, are the Dolphins, they're so obsessed with throwing these, 3-yard extended carries to Jarvis Landry. Are they ever going to give him enough of opportunity downfield? And is he just going to, take it and run with it? It was just so much inconsistency last year. But what we saw from Cutler, it was interesting because I think a lot of people, kind of pumped Parker up in the draft season thinking that Cutler was going to throw downfield a lot more. And to some extent he did, if you look at Parker's numbers. But Jarvis Landry, got 13 catches. So it's not like their offense really changed. They just somehow managed to get enough volume to basically get both of those guys involved. But, Parker's stats would have been even better. He would have had over 100 yards. He caught like a 20-yard pass that for some reason they ruled a fumble. I mean, he literally caught it and ran for like 3 yards before losing it. But who knows with the NFL these days? It's they're just pulling stuff out of a hat when it comes to overturning or confirming calls. So
did you see him go up though and take it away from that cornerback down? I think it was down the right side. He literally went up. He said thank you and took it. It was beautiful.
Yep. He mossed him.
Totally.
And there's only a few guys in the league that can do that, and he's one of them. And it's just a question of kind of if he gets it together between the years in terms of the playbook and just kind of taking this seriously, which has been kind of the rumors about why he hasn't been better earlier in his career. And earlier, I mean, the guy's like 22, 23, so it's not like we're talking about a veteran here. But I mean, the Jets stink. We saw what Crabtree did to them last week. It's going to be, again, the only way this kind of goes south is if they just blow them out too quickly and it's Ajayi, or if it's somebody else in the passing game. But he's going to be able to do whatever he wants.
But even then, like Ajayi had 28 carries last week, and they still had enough to give Jarvis Landry 15 targets and give Devontae Parker 9. Like if Devontae Parker can be a little more efficient with his targets, maybe he catches 6 of 9 instead of 4 of 9, then you're looking at 120 yards, maybe finds the end zone. Real nice day. I love Devontae Parker. I'm all in on him this season. I own him so many places, so I'm really curious to see kind of the next couple weeks how it evolves. And we have to remember that was the first game for the Dolphins, so they're working out a lot of the kinks, and I expect to see a lot more this week out of them. Let's talk about our tight end plays of the week. If you tuned in week 1, I gave you a name. It worked out. If you tuned in week 2, I gave you a name. It worked out. It is week 3. It's Kobe effing Fleener time. Willie Snead is still out. This is the last week without Willie Snead. Kobe Fleener has 2 games and 2 touchdowns. This is a game where the Panthers should put up points, and New Orleans will have to throw and keep up. And I expect Kobe effing Fleener to be an amazing tight end once again. I don't care, Damian, if it comes in the last minute of the game or the first minute of the game. He'll find the end zone. He'll produce for fantasy owners, and he'll be a great start.
No comment. No comment.
And if they can't throw it to him, they'll find a way to run a sweep so he can get in the end zone.
Yeah, I can't deny that. I'm sure, like I said, Sean Payton will find a way to make sure you see his name in the box score. Okay, I gotta regroup here.
Yeah.
Every time we go Fleener and Gronk, things go off the rails. So for the sake of not having a 6-hour show here, I'm just gonna move on to my guy, and
All
it's
right.
O'Doyle rules. Jack Doyle. Kind of a bizarre, it's been a little bit of a roller coaster with Doyle because he got really popular in the preseason when we thought that, Luck was going to play week 1.
Yep.
Just the way that, he kind of the targets you saw at the end of last season. And then once we saw what this offense looked like with Scott Tolzien, everybody dropped Doyle. But then, Jacoby Brissett showed up, and Jack Doyle went 8 for 79 on 8 targets against the Cardinals, who hadn't given more than 53 yards receiving to a tight end in, I think, like over a season. So, the combination of doing this just from a volume perspective is encouraging because obviously we don't know how Brissett is going to basically divvy it up here. But from what we've seen, he definitely likes his tight end. And if Doyle can get this type of success against, one of the best teams that guarding the position, then I certainly don't think he's going to have much issue, putting up stats against the Browns.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think, I think both of these teams have a lot of weaknesses in the sense that, this isn't a game that's going to get out of hand in either direction. It should stay pretty close. And the fact that, Doyle might be that preferred target in kind of that short area, it's a lot easier to complete that pass than to try to go over the top to T.Y. Hilton or Moncrief. So I think if, he gets another 7 to 10 targets potentially, he's got a very high floor. And if he ends up getting into the end zone, then he could easily be a top 5 tight end this week.
Yeah, I like that call. I think Doyle, Ben Watson kind of fits in that bucket. We're just going to be pelted with targets. I think Cameron Brate gets back to it a little bit this week, so I like all those guys. And obviously Jason Witten, man. That guy's 22 targets through 2 weeks. That is insane. So yeah.
Yeah, he outlasted Romo, man. Romo's calling his games now. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, it's insane. All right, time to shift our focus and talk sits of the week. Dave Cherney, if you are listening, you'll want to plug your ears because Dakota Prescott, have a seat. Take a seat on the bench. You are dog doo-doo. 89 attempts through 2 weeks, but he's kind of the check down king, and he's not getting a lot of yards, and like 7-8 yards per attempt. Like, I don't know what you're doing. They're forcing the ball to Dez. Dez has 16 targets, and he's just not catching it in the end zone. Yeah, there's no way I'm playing Dak Prescott on the road against Arizona. No chance.
Yeah, I'm tempted to agree with you here, and I guess I don't see the upside in this matchup. I don't, I obviously don't think that Dak is kind of as bad as he was last week. I think there were a lot of factors that contributed to that, but I don't think this is an explosive offense right now. With the way that passing game is working, because that Jason Witten and Cole Beasley aren't going to do much beyond 9-yard catches. So I think they're going to be working to try to establish the run. I think when Zeke gets 8 carries for 7 yards and you lose by 35 points, I think it's pretty easy to see kind of what went wrong there, and maybe we change the game plan a little bit and kind of lean on him in the offensive line some more instead of having Dak throw 85 passes. So if we factor in kind of the fact that I think Arizona has their own offensive issues, so it's not going to be a case where they're going to put up 35 points and we're going to be in a shootout here. I think both teams are going to be working to control the ball and kind of not turn it over. A lot of safer throws, checkdowns, like you said, and I think for that reason it's going to be hard to expect a lot of fantasy production from Dak unless he's fortunate enough to basically run one in.
Yeah, I don't get it. Like, I don't think he's that good. I think he's gonna have a lot of turnover. I think he's gonna be kind of a mess, and no, thank you. I do have a question from Twitter. You already mentioned that Cam Newton is your sit of the week. I'm comfortable playing him. I think he's gonna have a big game here. But Damian, I'm gonna throw out a few other names, and you just tell me if you'd start them over Cam Newton. Let's start with 75-ish%, and we'll head down. Carson Wentz. You starting Carson Wentz versus the Giants over Cam Newton?
Yes.
Carson Palmer at home versus Dallas?
No.
Andy Dalton on the road versus Green Bay?
I want to do it, but he's doing the Cam thing. He's throwing it to the sideline. He's throwing it in the stands.
Pick your poison. Trevor Siemian on the road at Buffalo?
No, I got to go Cam just because if that turns into a blowout, he's just not going to have the attempts.
What about Jay Cutler, Smoking Jay at the Jets?
Yeah, you know what? Why not?
Why not?
Jets, right?
Fire him up. Deshaun Kaiser at Indy. He's got that rushing ability. I recommended him now we're getting too aggressive.
Now we're getting ridiculous. Next thing you know, you're going to throw Sage Rosenfels at me.
Who's your favorite?
Reference today.
Who's your favorite former Redskins quarterback? Sage Rosenfels, Gus Frerotte. I don't know. There's got to be some other ones. Like
Patrick Ramsey. Rex Grossman.
Yeah, sexy Rexy.
You have to go Frerotte just because of the headbutt. I mean, the headbutt's like that's a drop the mic moment.
I love how we're all talking about concussions and Gus Frerodte's over there just giving himself one. So it sounds like unless you can get these widely owned quarterbacks like Jameis Winston, Derek Carr, Marcus Smart. Are you starting Mariota or Cam Newton this week? Mariota at home versus Seattle or Cam Newton at home versus New Orleans?
I'd probably go Newton just because I think Mariota's looked just as concerning in kind of limited sample. I mean, you can't just given the talent that Cam has shown throughout his career and the fact that yes, New Orleans is awful. Like you can't really drop Cam outside of like your top 12 at worst, maybe. So I'm not doing that. I don't. In years past, I mean, when he played New Orleans, it was basically an automatic top 3 QB. And it was the DFS chalk, and I don't feel like that about him anymore. I still think he has that potential, but I just think the floor is a lot lower, and the likelihood that he produces that isn't there.
So
he's not the top. Yeah,
the floor is lava. Don't mind my background; it's just falling. I'll deal with it later. I know you can't see it right now, Damian, but just trust me. My backdrop is just crashing. It heard your fire takes and it just couldn't handle it.
Well, I guess we're not mainstream as we thought in the pre-show.
That's just our friendly reminder to let everyone know that we're trying over here. But Damian, it sounds like Cam Newton's a little closer to that top 10 than you think you thought you would. Yeah.
Yeah, he moved from like 13 to 12.
Yeah. Let's talk running back sits of the week. I'm gonna go. LaShawn McCoy scares me. Like we kind of talked about earlier, running back such an arbitrage of injuries and just awfulness. But Broncos D, we saw what he did to Zeke. They're allowing just 2.9 yards per carry. They haven't allowed a rushing touchdown on the season. I am doing everything I can to avoid LaShawn McCoy. I'm playing Chris Carson against him, over him. In PPR, I'm Chris Thompson, Tariq Cohen, Buck Allen. Like, I'm like Jacquizz Rodgers, but he's facing Minnesota. Probably have to go McCoy there, but like, I don't feel great about it. Are you kind of with me?
I mean, if we look at what happened to Zeke, I think it's hard to kind of say, you're being unreasonable because, if the Cowboys and Zeke can basically have a 8-yard game, then I certainly think the Bills here can as well. I don't see them getting away from McCoy the way the Cowboys did from Zeke, because I just don't think they'd ever let Tyrod throw like 35, 40 passes in a game. So
Yeah.
I guess in that sense, I think his floor is a little bit higher. But I mean, and if we say their defense is a little bit better, it's not going to be as easy for Denver to put up points so quickly. I think you're hoping the game can stay, close enough for long enough that we get, I don't know, like on the low end, like 15 for like 50 from him, or
Yeah.
15 for 40, which is obviously not what you want from a top 10 guy. So, but I think it's going to be hard to sit him. Obviously, I don't think anybody was sitting Zeke in season long last week. So,
Like,
I don't think it's at a point where we're benching him. But
would you play Carlos Hyde over him? Carlos Hyde at home versus the Rams?
Yeah, I think I might. I think McCoy would still. I can't see benching him, but I think he's probably in that RB2 territory instead of RB1 this week.
What about Tevin Coleman at Detroit?
No, I can't count on the workload from Coleman.
Jonathan Stewart versus New Orleans?
No. But it's just because it's Jonathan Stewart and
Samaje
Samaje
Perine at home or versus Oakland?
If
Rob
Kelly
Kelly's
is out, yeah, I think that's it sounds crazy to say, we're starting Perine over McCoy, but I do think that's something that could make sense if we were expecting him to get 15 carries.
Yeah, my boy Chris Carson at Tennessee.
No, I don't know. I guess that one's tough because I find it weird to say that I'm expecting him to get 20 carries, but like,
Yeah,
I am. So I guess maybe if just Rawls is like healthier, or I don't know.
Yeah.
I still find that hard to do. So probably McCoy.
Yeah, and in PPR, maybe he gets 5, 6, 7 targets out of the backfield and kind of makes up for a terrible day. But yeah, I am not optimistic. And if you went running back heavy and you like some of your other options, if you have Ty Montgomery and Carlos Hyde and Devonta Freeman and whatever, like I don't like. I would not be against that. And at FPAOP, if you have some debates, if you're trying to figure out, do I play this guy? Do I not play this guy? Here's my other options. We're happy to help. So send them on over and we'll see what we can do. Once again, we are not, we don't see into the future. We can't tell you for sure, but we'll give you our opinion and hopefully it's good enough. And if McCoy has a bad day or one of your other fantasy players has a bad day, don't yell at them on Twitter. It does nothing. You won't get more fantasy points from it. They're not going to play harder next time. They just get more mad at us as fantasy analysts. So please don't do that.
Just come yell at us.
Yeah.
We don't mind it.
Yeah, we don't mind it at all. Tell us how stupid we are for wanting to play, or tell Damian how stupid he is for sitting Cam Newton versus New Orleans. We're happy to take the abuse. Damian, talk to me about your running back sit of the week, because I could not disagree more.
So I have it as Dalvin Cook right now. And again, this was a little bit like the QB situation where it's not that I don't like Cook in a vacuum here. It's more so just looking at kind of the top 15 running backs. Again, we're not going to give you a sit that's not even a top 20 guy because that's just really not doing anything for you. But this is assuming that Bradford doesn't play.
Yep.
Because I think if he doesn't play, I don't have any faith in Keenum being able to get the ball downfield.
Yeah, I was listening to the late round QB, I believe, and they were talking about Keenum kind of as a starter and how awful he is. Is it just if Keenum's under center, no Vikings?
I think you have to look at it that way because, I mean, look at what happened last week. You would have thought the game script could be in their favor if they're trailing, but they didn't take any. And that's the thing with Cook too is you saw that run he had that he should have. I mean, he should have scored. I think he did score, but they called it down. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at the kind of the aerial view of that, and I mean, they're just that was just a phenomenal cutback. I mean, I feel like there's 3 running backs in the league right now that can make that cut in terms of just see it in time to do it. So it's hard benching a guy with that much natural talent, but if he doesn't make that run, what's he have 10 carries for 30 yards? So
but he made the run. So it's one of those things you could say, well, if he didn't have this, then he wouldn't have that. But if for me personally, I think you have to play Dalvin Cook. I think he's a workhorse. Get 20 carries. I know Tampa's defense is much improved, but if they have Case Keenum under center, they need playmakers, and I think Dalvin Cook is skilled enough. You mentioned that cutback run. I think he could be a guy that I'd play him over LaShawn McCoy. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't know if you factor in Keenum. I don't know if the matchup is really that much better for Cook. And if it's not, then if we're just looking at these guys as players, I don't think that's. I mean, he is much younger, but I still think LaShawn McCoy is a better NFL running back at this point. So I don't know. It's not. I mean, it's not. It's certainly not a ridiculous thing to say. I think they're fairly close in the rankings this week. But again, it's entirely contingent on just kind of what we might expect from a game plan situation here, and not anything to do with Cook himself.
Yep. Watch those practice reports. See if Bradford can go. It seems like a real mixed signals going that he'll be fine and he can miss a month. Who knows? So
day to day, aka month to month.
Maybe we'll see him in October. Let's talk some receivers to avoid. You're gonna hear some big names. You're gonna hear some interesting takes, and take it for how you will. I don't like Amari Cooper this week. I know we talked about that game. I know we talked about Kirk Cousins. I know we talked about that game being high scoring. But Amari Cooper scares me. Josh Norman will be on him. I expect most of the game. I think Michael Crabtree is the clear red zone option at receiver. He proved it last week. He's the better player. Obviously, I think Amari Cooper is super talented, but I think the Redskins will do a lot to take him away. I think Jared Cook could feast. I think, the running backs, obviously, like Jalen Richard had a nice game last week. I think he could be a thing again. If you have Cooper, you're probably playing him. But if you picked up J.J. Nelson, I don't hate playing J.J. Nelson over him. I think there is some other names that could make sense, and I'm just examining it and seeing if I could find better options.
This is what I'll say about Cooper. There's no chance I'm benching him anywhere I have him. And at the same time, I won't be the least bit surprised if he goes 3 for 35. Mm-hmm. And I'm just going to leave it at that because honestly, that's Amari Cooper in a nutshell. It's hard to think of a player that we've been more excited for on a week-to-week basis, or not even excited for. I think there's very few players that you can say their floor and their ceiling, basically their spectrum of production on any given week is anywhere between 160 yards and 2 touchdowns and 30 yards and no touchdowns.
Yeah.
And it's every single week. It doesn't matter, with the exception of when he plays like Denver or something. Pretty much, he can do that in a terrific matchup. He can do that in a mediocre matchup.
Yep.
You just don't know, and it just feels like he's always going to do just a little bit less than you're expecting.
Yeah, and it's almost like he's one of those guys that you might just kind of have to play because he could have a game with 12 targets against Denver where he gets 8 catches for 160 and 2 touchdowns. He could also have a game with 12 targets against the Jets and get 3 catches for 25 yards and no touchdowns. And you're just like, well, what happened? Why? What's going on?
Right.
So,
I mean, it's honestly, I think the best way to put it is, and this doesn't really mean it's the right way of thinking, but I'd be a lot more upset if I benched Cooper and he got 150 yards and a touchdown than if I played him and he got 30 yards.
Yeah, I think that's fair. But like I said, if I have J.J. Nelson, I just got him. It would be really hard for me to go, yeah, I'm gonna play Amari Cooper over J.J. Nelson in this tasty matchup. Talk to me about your wide receiver sit of the week.
Yeah, I'm going with Hopkins again. I went with him week 1 when they were playing Jacksonville, and all things considered, I think it was a pretty decent call. I think he went for 60 yards or so. But again, it's just I don't think that this offense has any other weapons. I think that the Patriots are going to put Gilmore on him. They might even shade McCourty that way too, because I mean, what else are they going to do? Yeah. They're not going to. Jalen Strong, like Braxton Miller, all their tight ends are concussed.
Jalen Strong has been cut, so that tells you that.
Wonderful.
Yeah. There is a wrinkle that Will Fuller could be back soon. I don't know that it's this week, but he's practicing. They cut Jalen Strong. That could be weird. Obviously, Deshaun Watson's peppering him with targets, but Deshaun Watson is a rookie that looks like he, has a lot of growth to work on. So I don't hate this call a lot. It could be a 12, 13 target type game, but I mean, even when Brian Hoyer was doing that, you expected the targets to kind of be on target, where Deshaun Watson, he kind of sails. Like his footwork is never consistent enough where he won't overshoot the target, or even when he was at Clemson with some of those studs, like it never quite worked out like you kind of expected. Obviously, when everything clicks, he looks amazing, but there will be some bumps. And New England, I mean, their defense is okay. It's getting better, but their back end is pretty good. And I'm with you. I'm pessimistic about Hopkins.
Well, and also the other thing I think is that I think we saw that this Texans defense gave New England a lot of trouble last year, and I don't think this is going to be a blowout. So I don't think we're going to get the usual, the Pats are up 24 in the fourth quarter and we're just playing like cover 2 prevent and Hopkins catches 45 yards on the last drive. I think this game's going to be close enough where it's going to be tight D throughout, and you're not going to get those garbage time points.
Yep, 100% agree. Let's talk tight ends and guys we're avoiding, and I'm going to start with Tyler Eifert. The Bengals offense is a mess. I think it's better this week. I think AJ Green and Andy Dalton are reliable. I think the offense could look better, but Eifert's he's really, I don't know. Like I would play Ben Watson over him. I would play Jack Doyle over him. I'd play Cameron Brate over him. I don't know. I got to see it from that offense, and I have to know that it's getting better, and I have to know that he's healthy, or at least healthy-ish. And he's dealing with a back injury, and he's dealing with a knee injury, and I don't know. It scares me. So if I have Tyler Eifert, I'm probably sitting him this week.
He hasn't even done anything yet. I don't know how he's hurt. Like, how do you get hurt? He's caught like 3 passes all season.
He ran a route, so that that's how he injured his knee, and then he stepped out of bounds and came back and caught a pass, so that injured his back. The whole running and catching balls seems to injure him.
Too much motion.
Yeah,
too much.
Yeah,
too many moving parts.
It's just a lot going on there. It's just not good for anybody.
No, not good. I'm going to stick with the Vikings for my call here and go with Kyle Rudolph. And again, I don't think they're going to be able to move the ball. I think in a weird way, maybe you can make the case that if they're going to complete some passes, and it's probably easier to complete them to Rudolph in his patented 5-yard curl than it is to Diggs or Thielen further downfield. So
Yeah.
maybe in a full point PPR, he gets enough volume, but I don't think he really makes enough plays downfield, and I don't think Minnesota's going to be able to move the ball very well if Bradford is indeed out. So. Again, if you have, I still wouldn't want to drop him necessarily. Like I
No.
have actually, I had the situation where I had Rudolph and Eifert in a league, and I actually dropped Eifert for Jack Doyle, who I'm probably going to start this week.
Yeah.
So I still, if I have to drop one of those two guys, I'd keep Rudolph over Eifert for season long, just because I'm tired of dealing with the injuries and the inconsistency. But the Rudolph kind of hate could be short term here.
Yeah, and the other idea is look at doing maybe a 2-for-1. Maybe include Eifert. There's some people that still believe in him, even though he hasn't really done much over that, basically his career. He's a guy that was going in 6th, 7th, 8th round. So maybe you do a Eifert plus for another tight end, or Eifert plus for a receiver, and then go pick up one of the, Ben Watson, Jack Doyle, Cameron Brate, maybe even Zach Miller, the Bears. Like, you can find something. So that's something to explore. But yeah, I think I'm 100% in agreement with you. All right, Damian, this is a lot of fun. Hopefully we got you set for week 3. Make sure you check out fakepigskin.com all week long. We have so much good content going up there. We also have, at FPAOP on Twitter. Send us questions. Let us know. Start, sit, waiver wire, all that good stuff. If there's some of the waiver wire guys slip through and you can still add drops, I would look to do that. But for Damian Dabrowski, I'm Kyle Robert, and we'll talk to you guys.